Okay, I'm going to start, and if I get dings for the waiting room, I will definitely do that. Hey, just so everybody knows, I'm real interactive. I like the personal nature of these. I don't like 100 people in a webinar because I feel like we don't get a chance to talk or to do anything. So you should have the ability to unmute yourself at any given time if you want to, or you can type in the chat. But feel free to interrupt me at any given point. It's why we're here is more of like a web shop. I only have two promises. I have five whole slides, and that's all I have. So I don't want to PowerPoint you to death. I wanted to make this more of a discussion about just the things that we encounter, kind of on a day-to-day basis when it comes to the topics of resolution and pixel pitch, because a lot of people haven't done LED projects yet. Or if you have, we get a lot of conflicting info from manufacturers or different people. And then we have industry associations that also give us advice on things as well. So anyways, I wanted to boil that down to a real quick and easy, 5 to 10 minutes, and then, kind of let it go wherever it goes from there. So with that, I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right. So you all can see my screen. We've got two images on here. Both images, if I asked most people, now we're AV people in here, so I may get a different answer for you, and we're not going to put anybody on the spot. But if you ask most people which of these images was higher resolution, they would say the image on the left because it looks clearer, right? But you may know, just as we know, and my 12-year-old daughter actually knew yesterday, she looked at it pretty closely. These images are exactly the same resolution. They have the exact same amount of pixels on both pictures, just one is larger than the other. So this is what I actually call perceived resolution. What does it actually look like to the viewer from where they're at? And that's actually a lot more important than total pixel count. Consumer electronics companies have done a really good job of ingraining this idea of resolution in somebody's head. But, a 4K screen looks different at 10 feet than it does at 2 feet. And it looks different at 50 inches than it does at 400 inches, right? And so just the total resolution isn't actually a really great way to think about screens, especially if we're trying to design something to meet a certain need. Both of these screens actually have the exact same resolution, but they have different pixel density. And that's where, that's where things start to change. I'm going to let somebody in real quick. So pixel density is actually something that we should start thinking about. And if flat panel manufacturers would jump on pixel density like LED manufacturers would, I think we'd all have an easier time determining what is like the right screen for an application. But of course, we have no real standards in AV. So, nobody's going to get on the same page and start talking about these things. If we're talking about screen sizing, though, and we're talking about the differences in how we determine screen size and pixel density, we really have to know just two things to start. And I remember this from my childhood and watching Sesame Street. But near and far, that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for what is the nearest viewer. And the nearest viewer is or the closest viewer, that's going to help us determine pixel density. And our farthest viewer is going to help us determine screen size, right? And if we know those two things, we can at least start to help clients talk about what they need to do or what we need to do to specify the right thing. So screen size, you've probably seen the screen size stuff before. There's a quick shout out to, Avixa. They have their display image size for 2D content in audiovisual systems. We love acronyms. I don't know, Discus is that one. And also to Daylight, because I worked for them for a while. But when you're talking about farthest viewer, the Infocom or the Avixa rule was always this, for basic decisions and analytical decisions. They kind of had two different ratios. And they were going to say the height of your screen divided by 4 for basic decisions, or the height of your screen divided by 6, the farthest viewer divided by 6 would be the height of your screen. So you needed that farthest viewer, that distance to the farthest viewer, and you divide it by 4 or by 6. I don't know about you, but when I'm talking to clients, or if I asked any of you, how big is your TV at home? I bet you all of you could tell me the diagonal, but few of you would be able to tell me the height off the top of your head. The reason that Avixa uses height is because not all screens are the same aspect ratio. So we have to use height as something that we can use for like a common measurement that will tell us what the actual size of the elements on the screen are going to be. But when we're talking to clients, or we're trying to do something really quick to let people know what we're thinking about, I don't find height to be super useful. And in most applications, we're talking about 16:9 or 16:10. And so what I love about when I worked at Daylight is we had broke this down into actually into diagonal. And since most of our applications are 16:9 or 16:10, you can actually just do farthest viewer divided by 2 is super simple for people to do. And anytime I gave training to architects for their AIA credits, et cetera, it was really easy to go through a divide by 2 exercise. And in fact, I made it kind of a joke. You know, if you're 20 feet long, divide by 2, 18 feet, divide by 2. And I actually had them like divide by 2. It made things very easy to know. And it's because really the height of a screen, if you think about the diagonal, and a 16:9, the height of your screen is really about half of your diagonal anyway. It's 49% of the diagonal is the height in 16:9. So you can just take those numbers and cut them in half. So I say the divide by 2, divide by 3 rule makes it real easy to quickly tell somebody what that diagonal would be in a room. And the reason this is really important is a lot of people undersize. They got a 20-foot conference room and they go, oh, we're going to put an 86-inch display up there. Okay, well, you got a 20-foot conference room. Half of that is 10. You should have about a 120-inch screen in there. You know, you're actually picking a screen that's about 30% too small for this room for the type of thing you're going to be doing. So this gives you a really quick way to get to a size. Now, sometimes, especially in LED, you're not sizing the screen based on a room or an application. Sometimes you're sizing it to fill space. So if it's a convention center or it's a wall above an escalator or it's something like that, they may have a size already in mind. And then you're working backwards from, okay, from that size and the distance people are at, then what kind of pixel density do I need? So we don't always have the chance to, I guess, to dictate the size or to recommend the size. But if you do, this is how you do it. And why that's important is because from there, we have this other thing called the closest viewer. Now, closest viewer dictates what the resolution needs to be at a minimum in order for it to not look pixelated, right? So we don't want it to be a Seurat painting like after Sunday afternoon in the park or whatever the pointillism painting is. We don't want people to see all those dots. And so what we need to do is we need to know what that dot pitch is. And some manufacturers will tell you, well, take the dot pitch, times it by 2, and then that's the amount of meters that you need to be away from the screen. Well, we live in the US and most of us think in feet, not meters. If you look at the Discus standard, they have a ratio that you go through based on the average element height. I will say, talking to clients, most of the time, if you ask them what they're putting on the screen, a lot of times they don't know yet. In applications like control rooms and things like that, they will, and you can get that deep into the engineering. But again, our most precious time is engineering time. That's billable time. So typically, if we're just talking to a client about conceptual design and trying to get a conceptual budget concept together on like what kind of technology we're going to use, you're not going to send that to your sales engineer and have them go through all of that design principle. So what I came up with is based on the Discus and based on the 2 times the dot pitch is the meters, boils down real easy to what I call 7-11 rule. Okay, so you take your closest viewer, divide by 7, that'll give you your high end of the dot pitch. You divide by 11, that'll give you the lower end of the dot pitch. And as an example, if you're 14 feet away, divide by 7 and 11, you need a 1.2 to 2 millimeter, somewhere in that range solution in order for people to be able to see that in a way that it's not too pixelated. But you may want the finer dot pitch if you have a lot of detail work, and you may want the other if you're just doing video or things like that, or if they're at the farther edge. But this 7-11 rule is a really quick and easy way. Divide by 7, divide by 11, and that'll give you a range. And then what that does is if you see, like here, I just kind of broke it out. If you're talking to somebody, you can real quickly say, okay, if your closest viewer is about 4 feet, yeah, you definitely need 0.6 millimeter. You definitely need micro LED. If your closest viewer is 14, you know what? You should probably be in 1.5 or 1.8. Maybe we go to 1.2 because we're on the edge of that if you're doing something really high detail like a control room or someplace where they're looking at traffic cameras, or maybe they're looking at engineering photos, or maybe they're looking at, you know, heart MRIs or things like that where they need that extra detail. You may go down one. But this gives you a real quick and easy way in that 7-11 rule to create these kind of ranges and go, okay, based on the distance to your closest viewer, this is what you would be in. Now, sometimes they don't care about the closest viewer. Let's say it's like transit. And they say, well, you know, people may be able to walk right up to the wall. So the closest viewer could be at arm's length at 3, but that's not who we're aiming at. We're aiming at the people walking down the hall or passing through the airport at the terminal on the escalator. And that's 14 feet away. Again, you can just use this and go, okay, you can, instead of closest viewer, just call that target viewer. And you could kind of go in and use this same, you know, rationale and ratio. But really, if you can find the farthest viewer and you can divide by 2 or 3, and you can find the closest viewer and divide by 7 or 11, you can quickly get, this is what size the screen should be. This is probably the dot pitch that you should be looking at, or at least the range. And then from there, you can determine based on budget, et cetera, is LED even a fit for this project? Do I need to do something like a video wall? Do I need to do projection? Or do we need to readjust customers' expectations or think of different ways that we can make that target viewer farther away from the screen? What I've found though in LED is most people ask for resolution. They go, oh, I need a 4K wall. Well, what are we doing? Well, I want a 4K wall and I want it in 1.5 millimeter. Okay, well, you know, a 4K wall in 1.5 millimeter is, you know, 30 feet wide, right? They're like, whoa, no, I only have 15 feet to work with, but I want 4K. All right. So what are you actually asking for? They just want a picture that looks clear at the viewing distance. And so that's when we really have to try to shift the conversation from resolution to pixel density, because resolution, like I showed in the beginning, when we go back here, you know, resolution, these two are the same resolution, right? But they're definitely different pixel density. Pixel density is what you perceive the resolution to be. And that's really where I try to turn the conversation to in these things. As far as info or quick hack tools, I mean, this is what I have for you guys on that front. But I want you to if you open your mics or jump into chat, I'd love to answer any questions on what you're seeing out there or challenges that you've had in LED versus video wall, or misperceptions on, you know, resolution, et cetera. Mike's coming in, but he's got his breakfast. I went too quick for Mike. I promised it would be 10, 15 minutes. Nutter butter, dude. I knew just by the shape. Those in
Snacks, baby. I bring one thing you'll learn about me wherever I go, no matter what meeting it is, what organization, I bring snacks.
I like that.
Make every meeting better. Snacks aren't just for kids.
They are. You know what's funny is I know a guy who worked for Merck, and they were trying to figure out why one of their rooms wasn't used. And he was going through a whole technology analysis and doing data and looking at the screens and looking at the cameras and looking at all these things. And he finally just went in there and sat in there for a couple hours, and he watched people come in with lunch, and there was no place to set the lunch down. So they went to another room, and he figured out real quick, all he needed to do was put a credenza in there to put lunch on. And all of a sudden the room was like one of the most popular rooms in the building. But you're right. Snacks make the world go around.
For millennia, humans have gathered around food.
There we go.
Nobody will not come to your meeting because you have snacks. Right? People won't be like, oh, there's snacks, I'm not going to that meeting.
Exactly.
It's usually the opposite problem.
So you're in Vegas, Mike, where there's a ton of LED. I mean,
there is.
When you're out there, what are the biggest kind of challenges, misconceptions you've had in selling it, and what are, you know, any hacks that you want to share with folks?
But it's usually that whole, like, I usually with most people, have to go through the whole what's a pixel and how do LED, LCD images work, what's pixel density. Like one of the reasons I love some of the old, you'll still find old Panasonic plasmas floating around.
Yep.
And most of those, even up until into the, I think the 85 inch, their resolution is like 1368, whatever that is.
Yep.
So if you get up really close and you actually look in the screen, you can see the individual pixels and you can see the space between them.
Yep.
So I love when I see those because I can actually take somebody and go, see that? Look, that's a pixel right there. I said, and what's happened over time is pixels have gotten smaller and therefore we've brought them closer together. And so your density, and so when we talk about HD, I still sometimes have to explain HD versus 4K, what does it mean? And that it's literally just math, and that 1920 by 1080 literally means 1920 columns by 1020 or 1080 pixels. I have to explain that to them. And once now, so you spend the first 15, 20 minutes doing that. Once they get that, and you start talking about density, then we can move into viewing distance. What's your content? Why are you building this wall? Is it simply a wow factor? Is it to show marketing content? Do you want to actually show some very detailed stuff? Are images part of your DNA? Is it important that your images be really, really faithful? And then we start getting into that before we even get into pricing. And at the end of the day, a lot of times pricing is what will determine whether it's 4K or 1080. Just simple, just you do the math and then they go, we can't afford that, so we're going to go 1080. And then I don't do too much in the signage world because in any kind of outdoor LED in Nevada is considered a sign and it has to be done by a sign contractor. And we don't have that license. We're an AV, a low voltage contractor, not a sign contractor. Which is interesting because the things that make it a sign really are structural issues, mounting issues, other than wind load. An indoor, 40-foot wide video wall weighs the same or has the same issues regarding rigging and structure and all that as an outdoor one.
Yeah.
It's one of those little things the contractors board hasn't caught on to yet, so I'm not going to say anything. So that we're typically doing the indoor stuff, and a lot of the conversation is still focused on the very basic stuff, particularly once the project gets serious, because at that point I'm not dealing with a tech anymore or any kind of graphics person or somebody like that. I've now moved into head of engineering, head of procurement, VP of operations, that sort of stuff, and they don't know. They just know they bought a 4K TV at Best Buy because it was the best image they'd seen, so they bought that, right? So that's the one they want. So that's kind of where we start, and then pixel pitch starts to matter. The only time, generally speaking, that we lead with pixel pitch is when the content creator is part of the conversation and from the very get-go is saying, I need a pixel density minimum of X.
Yeah. Now that's based on partners. I mean, it's a huge part of the conversation. It's something we talked about in kind of our intro last time we did one of these. Was content should be a huge part of the conversation when we're talking about any of these things. I had a job when I was at a manufacturer where we put in a 4K DLP projector. Well, most 4K DLP projectors aren't really 4K. They use a QXGA chip and they move it 3 times. Well, when you blow this in a normal size screen, 220 inches or something, 150, you might not see that too much, but they had blown this thing up to about 30 feet wide and they were trying to look at space shuttle launch details on it. And you can see the pixels move when you blow them up that big on a 4K projector, right? Now, if we had talked about content up front, we probably never would have done that, right? Or we would have made sure that they knew that they should use it in native mode and not use the chip moving, just use it in QXGA or WQXGA and let that go. But yeah, that having those content conversations can really help you determine whether you're going to the low end or the high end of that pixel pitch. What I've found in my life, and maybe somebody else can chime in on this, is if you're dealing with somebody that's not really technical and maybe doesn't have, they don't have a lot of time. They just want to know that you're using a methodology. Like a lot of people just want to know that there's some science behind what you're saying. They didn't just come in and say, well, that one, I want to sell 1.2 because 1.2 is more than 1.5 and I can make a better sale, right? So for me, a lot of times I can quickly say, okay, well, your farthest viewer's 10 feet back or 20 feet back, you need a 120-inch screen. And if your closest viewer's at 6 feet, we want to divide that by 11, you need about a 1.2 millimeter screen. They go, and that's probably going to be about $40,000 in this, application for that size at that dot pitch. They go, oh, wow. Now, some people may ask me to back up and how did those equations work and what are you talking about? Then I'm happy to do that teaching. But a lot of times in the quick and easy part of that conversation, giving people some idea that you're using math, you're using standards in order to recommend a solution becomes a quick way to build trust that you're not just throwing something out there based on what you want to sell, right?
Yeah, and I will say one other thing, particularly when dealing with gaming companies, and by gaming, I mean casinos. There's one other question you can ask pretty early on that starts to dictate which direction you're going is which budget is this coming out of? Is it coming out of maintenance or is this a CapEx item? Because if it's a CapEx item, there's a line item budget and they've allocated a certain number of funds. If it's maintenance because something died or somebody threw a beer bottle through a screen or whatever, they got to go find the money. So right off the bat, that tells you, are we going high end or are we going good enough to get by till next year when we can put real money towards it, kind of thing?
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of why this conversation is good, especially in those capital projects when you're dealing with somebody that's planning something. Is because a lot of times, and this is just like kind of maybe some sales info for people who are here in sales. A lot of times maybe they've given that budget over, let's say the budget lands in IT. And IT says, well, I have an extra $60,000 to spend. And then you figure out that really what they need is a $120,000 wall based on distance and pitch and everything else. And for the experience they want to provide their guests or whatever they're doing, or their internal employees, that's really the solution that needs to be recommended. I'm not a fan of recommending a solution to the budget in the beginning. Like I'm a fan of saying, this is what you need to do what you want to do. If you have this much money, these are the compromises we would need to make in order to make that fit your budget. And are you comfortable making those compromises with this amount of money, right? And if the compromises are too much, like I have had projects where I've just had to say, you know what, for what you need to spend, like I would be taking your money disingenuously to provide you that solution because you will not be happy with it in the long run. And somebody will sell it to you. I'll tell you that now, but it's not going to be what you want. But sometimes, that budget can lie in other places. And that's why content can also be important, right? Like I've been in places before where maybe this money sits in the IT budget and they figure out that this is a marketing screen. And when you tell them what they need to do, what they want, and you get the people in who are actually going to use it, then the other stakeholders. Well, let's get the marketing people in here and show them the difference between 1.2 and 2.5. Oh, there's no way we can do 2.5. That does not show our content like we want. Great. Now, all of a sudden, maybe they go back and say, we need to find some marketing funds to add into the IT budget in order to get this project right, because we can't put our content up on what IT can pay for, right? And so finding those ways to get all those other stakeholders involved is huge. And that's why, you can start this way, but then obviously I'm a huge advocate of getting the product in front of somebody, showing them what that actually looks like. Because until you see those two side by side, you may say very well, you know what, I'm okay with the less expensive version because that looks fine to me for what we're doing. Or you may say there's no way that would work with what we're doing and I need to go up a notch and we need to find the extra money for that. But again, giving informed, Doug is saying, it's a point right there, giving informed estimate based on math and backing it with the formula or science. 100%, Doug, you're 100% right that being able to give a client a price and a recommendation that they know is grounded in some standard or science or formula, and then being able to go backwards. And Discus has their own formula for visual acuity, and I recommend you use it if you get that deep, but that's going to require you to know what they're actually putting on the screen, what the height of the elements are, exactly what type of content they're doing, and you're probably not going to get that level of access until you actually are in a place where you've kind of been vetted as the person that's going to be doing the project, right? And that's why you threw out this 7-11 rule. If you divide by 7, divide by 11, that furthest view, that'll give you the dot pitch that's in there. Jeff Fink is my East Coast counterpart. He joined us. Susan's kind of listening in. Susan's from projection. Hey Jeff, what have your clients had the most struggle with dot pitch and resolution?
Well, basically trying to understand, what it means.
Yeah.
Again, being an old timer at this, I remind people that once upon a time, 640 by 480 out of projector, we all sat there and went, "Oh my God, look how great that looks." And I try to make the point that unless you're looking at map images, MRIs, or something that needs insane level of detail, you don't need that many pixels to have a screen look really good, because your eye, fills in the blanks. It's just, I was at my ophthalmologist about a year ago, and we were talking about resolution and what people see. And he just made the point to me that on a 4K display, the human eye does not have enough rods and cones to pick up all the details. This is the weak link in the whole process. So, so frequently I have to talk people into the reality that you just don't need as much resolution as you think you did, especially if you're just watching video and PowerPoints and that kind of thing.
And sometimes I've seen in screens, just as a finer point, sometimes I've seen people mix pixel pitches, especially in signage applications, because your foveal vision, like your main vision, is about 6 degrees, right? So you see about this 6-degree window is where you focus, where your eyes are actually focused on what's in front of you. Now you pick up a lot of stuff in your peripheral, right? So I think in biology, they call this what you're looking at, and all the stuff out here are the things that can kill you, right? Like you need to be able to see contrast and motion out here, but you don't actually pick up a lot of detail out here. So, I've seen signage companies or marketing companies do, if their budget comes down to, hey, we need a 30-foot wall because we need to fill this space with content, but we can't afford to do, 1.5 across that whole wall, even though our people are only going to be 17, 18 feet away. Putting the middle section in lower pixel pitch and creating ambient effects or more effects out in different pixel pitches beyond, people have done that before, go up to 1.8 or go up to 2.5. And in fact, like if you look at something like The Mandalorian now, where they're doing production, the Mandalorian stage is all 2.5. It's 2.5 pixel pitch, which you'd think for production, they'd be using 0.9 or 0.6 or the most that they could. But the thing is that they're focusing, when they focus their camera, they're focusing on the subject, the actor. So the screen actually doesn't pick up the full focus of the camera. It's kind of, slightly out of focus because of the depth of field. But every once in a while, they have
the background, which
it's the background.
It's the background. And if it were real and you were really standing wherever that scene is being shot, those trees in the distance would be in the distance. Yes. And they would look fuzzy to you because you're human.
In the distance. Yeah. So the only time that they do mix and match, though, in there, and the interesting part about when they mix and match, they'll mix and match pixel pitches, because sometimes, like let's say the actor's walking through, he may be doing something where the screen is actually reflecting off of the black viewfinder in the helmet. And because the reflection is 12 feet away from the camera, the pixels show up in the reflection, even though they don't show up in the depth of field. And so they may have to they'll do things where they replace sections of it with higher density so that those reflections don't look pixelated on the helmet, and then they'll go back to it when they do things. But it saves them money. It's just another little tip that you can mix and match pixel pitches. That's going to require you to have different processor controller backbone, which is actually something we're going to talk about in a future one, is the difference between have an LED controller, a processor, windowing, all of those things that are going to actually help you get your content to the screen and what you need to look for in that in order to do that. So teaser for one that we're going to do in a little while. Anybody else have a question, an application, anything they want to throw out before we end? I promised it's going to be quick at like a half an hour. We're at 10:33. I started about 3 minutes in. Was this helpful to everybody as far as just boiling down those discus standards to something where you don't have to go through the whole calculation, that you can divide closest viewer by 7 or 11, and you can divide, farthest viewer by 2 or 3 to get a quick diagonal without having to do a height to diagonal translation? Does that make sense to everybody?
That's what I always tell people. If it's spreadsheets, no more than double. If it's sports or movies, no more than triple.
Yep. There you go. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, what I'll do, if you'd like, I think I have, if everybody wants to, if you want to copy the slides, because this has been recorded, so I'll get a copy of the chat. If you want to copy the slides, I'll leave this chat open for just a minute here. Throw your email in the chat, and then I can get you a copy of the 5 real quick slides that I used. But if you want to reuse those for your client or whatever, you can always, throw the HD logo off of it and use it for whatever you want. They're not proprietary in any way. So, well, hey, thanks for hanging out with us for a few. Like I said, we're going to be doing one of these on content. We're going to be doing one of these on processing and controllers. We did this one on pixel pitch, and then if we find something that we think people are having trouble with, we're just trying to do these as real quick and easy. Not get too nuts into the math, but find ways to give you easy hacks to talk to customers about what this is, and at least get you pointed in the right direction, so that when it gets back to engineering, then they can figure out the finer details of it.
And as I'm sure was mentioned earlier, HD, this is what we do, direct view LED. And
yeah, I didn't give a commercial, maybe I should, but yeah, I mean, we're a distributor of LED. This is what we do. I mean, we do LED and a lot of LED peripheral products. Happy to do that if you guys need help with stuff, but that's what we do. Jeff's been in the industry a long time. He's worked for integration. He's worked for manufacturers. I've worked for integration. I've worked for manufacturers. Brittany and Tola used to work for Screen Innovations. So she's worked projection, and she's worked now here with LED at HD. And then our newest is Steve Johnson, who used to work for Planar and Vadio. So he's, used to working on the manufacturer side. So we've got, 4 good people covering the country from kind of a sales and support standpoint. And yeah, that's what we do. So if you have projects that you need just help getting quick budgets on and things like that, we're super fast, and we're happy to help. We're small and eager. So.
Exactly. This is what we do. And final commercial word is we soon will have about 5,000 LED panels in our inventory. So there's no 20-week wait for product. If you have a project going on, get to us, because we have stuff, and we'd love to help you.
Sitting in Minnesota, so probably anywhere from 3 to 5 days away from anybody by ground. So. Awesome, everybody. Well, I got these emails. I'll send everybody a copy of the slides. If you have questions for me, feel free to jump out. You'll have my email at that point too. And thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week.